Vieira,
Here.
Miranda,
Here.
Carlson, and Citro.
Here. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start, I'm going to turn the floor over to Councilman Vieira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. This evening at Tampa City Council, obviously, there's a lot of different developments right now on the virus. I wanted to apologize to my colleagues for running in and out of council this morning. It was because I kept on getting pulled out for matters involving the virus and whatnot. But we'll be discussing tonight this evening's meetings. I'm sure that everybody will be individually briefed on it and in terms of what we can do to promote public safety. The way that I see it right now with this virus is we're going to be taking this on a week-by-week basis because, number one, we continue to learn additional information incrementally, and number two, we want to rely upon the advice and wisdom of experts who are in the position to best so opine on this issue. So tonight I'll be speaking with everybody at 6. We're meeting at 6. Is it 6 this evening? Okay. So tonight I'll be speaking with everybody regarding that, and I think everybody will be individually briefed. So again, just trying to take it on a week-by-week basis and see what we can do week to week to combat this challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's start with our agenda on item number 2, our monthly reports from the CRA activities.
Good afternoon, CRA board members. Michelle Van Loan, Economic and Urban Development. We're having technical glitches with the PowerPoint. Are you guys able to see it on your screens? Nope. Here we go. He brought up my computer. Okay. Okay, so
Almost.
CRA board staff report. I had no screen earlier. There we go. Hunky-dory. Okay, again, good afternoon. We're going to go through staff reports. I will be, for the next few months, filling in, reporting for West Tampa and Drew Park. We are in the process of working with HR to advertise the position, both for my old project position and to hire Malcolm Kiner's replacement. So we are already working with HR to go through that. And hopefully you'll see a new face soon.
I apologize. Malcolm is no longer with us? Malcolm Kiner is no longer with us?
So as of...
I apologize. Did anybody else?
No longer with us, sir.
He's alive. He moved to Gainesville.
Okay.
Yeah,
Never mind.
Okay, so Mr. Kiner got a wonderful job opportunity to be the Vice President of Real Estate Development for the Gainesville Housing Authority.
Nice.
And so his last day was a couple weeks ago. He had tried to come into your council meeting and wait to talk to all of you personally, and I thought a memo had gone out about the fact that he had given us 2 weeks' notice.
Say something.
Surely, go right ahead.
And we wished him well.
Yeah, great guy. I didn't know until he was leaving that he actually knows a lot about affordable housing, and that's my mistake for not asking about it probably. But I sent a memo to Ms. Van Loan and also Carol Post and Chief of Staff, just suggesting that if we could, it would be great to get a person who knows about affordable housing, since that's a major priority. And I don't know what the HR guidelines have been so far, but if you all, I couldn't talk to you about this before, but if you all feel inclined, it doesn't mean we have to get just a housing person, but if we could get somebody who knows about it, the housing department needs staff in addition to money.
And we've been having internal conversations, and most managers in community redevelopment, when you're looking at the redevelopment area versus economic development area, you tend to get people more on the ground with some of the community-based skills and experiences. So we would expect to have someone with some level of affordable housing background.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Councilman Goose.
I think we all were caught off guard. I was caught off guard at a meeting and had egg on my face that I didn't know that, and I immediately called Michelle, and she said she was making sure that memo went out right away because we were not alert that he was leaving. The only sad thing about it, we didn't get a chance to really recognize him for the work he did do for West Tampa.
Yes.
So eventually we want to make a motion to get him something for his work here in Tampa and for the job he did, because he did a good job.
We haven't yet let our fingers off of him, as he still technically has a lease over in Channel District.
I'm usually completely out of the loop, but I actually heard about it. I don't know.
All right, please proceed.
Okay, on for our monthly report for the CRAs. Let's see if we can get this to work. Oh, sorry. I'm using wrong technology. There we go. So for West Tampa, we have continuing to meet with our subcommittee meetings, and we'll talk about it during the budget. We've already reprogrammed money for one housing program, and we'll be talking about 2 more housing programs that will be coming before you in the coming months. Those subcommittees, as a new CRA and who just recently completed their strategic action plan, their subcommittees are now working on developing all those programs to come before you. Also, we made the deadline in January for the West Tampa Overlay District text update. And so the subcommittee, they also met last night, and they've been working diligently with our planning and development folks to also get that text amendment update through the system. And our special events, we're starting to gear up for our planning for the West Tampa Cultural and Unity Festival to be held next fall. Indirect activities, we have our stormwater project. Anyone who's been through the area, you can't miss it. Lots of torn up roadways, lots of stormwater equipment that's coming through the Cypress. And we're in phase 1, and we expect phase 1 to be completed later in the summer and moving on to phase 2. And the Tampa Housing Authority, they just had another groundbreaking earlier this week, and they're moving forward with their projects. And now it looks like we may have 3 new buildings going underway, and that they've partnered with a new developer for that. So we're getting excited about the level and speed with which Tampa Housing Authority is able to help replace the residents in West Tampa that also then help support our West Tampa businesses. Any questions about West Tampa?
Councilman Digfelder.
Thank you. The river property that the city owns, X number of acres over there, that I think most of us were out there for that discussion about affordable housing with the mayor. Is that within the CRA
Yes.
district?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So what sort of involvement as the CRA are we having? I take it, does the CRA, probably doesn't own it per se? Does it own by the city or CRA?
It's a city-owned land. The city had it for decades. We had facilities there for a long time. When those facilities relocated, they cleared the land. It's been used for staging areas for the time being as part of the mayor's Affordable Housing Task Force, issuing a new RFP on that area for a mix of housing and retail and services in that area is very high on the mayor's agenda. Vanessa McCleary has been leading that effort now to get that RFP out. They came to the West Tampa CAC meeting last month, actually it was last week, and presented what they thought the important points of an RFP should be in the criteria. They took extensive notes on the feedback from West Tampa CAC, and Vanessa will again be coming back at the end of this month to report back to the West Tampa CAC on that process and incorporating their ideas. So in developing the RFP and before it gets issued, the West Tampa CAC will have had input and, I don't want to say technically sign off, but their blessing of that RFP before it gets issued.
So I won't necessarily do this by motion, Mr. Chair, but I'll suggest, and I hope the rest of the board agrees with me, I'd love to hear, maybe next meeting before they issue the RFP, I'd love to hear her presentation in front of this body. If it's good enough to present to the CAC, I would think it'd be good enough for us to hear it. And also that's consistent with a point that we've made over the last year, is that we'd like to see important RFPs before they get out on the street. So, and then my other suggestion on that is I looked at that property a couple of weeks ago, I think, on the comp plan map. I think most of it is CMU 35, mixed use 35 units per acre. And I'm just wondering if we shouldn't have a city-initiated plan amendment to revisit some of that density. Just because, I believe, and obviously we'd want input from the community, but I believe it's an opportunity, a great opportunity for even more density on that location. And if we have more density, and if we're selling it, we could actually probably make more money too. But my main goal is just to have greater density in these types of urban, semi-urban areas. So, anyway,
And the plan was for multifamily, whatever shape or form that took for that
yeah.
property.
Yeah,
So
but
we'll-
CMU 35 lends itself typically to the 4-story, 3-story, 4-story stuff. And I'm thinking, isn't this a great opportunity maybe to go to like a UMU 60 or something like that and get into some, some mid-rises, some 6 stories, some 8 stories. As long as it's not, I don't want to intrude on that single-family neighborhood because I know it's across the street. But still, if you create some buffers and you design it right, I think we could get more density on that property.
I noted it. We'll take it back.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else?
Okay. The picture there, by the way, is Ray Park when everyone came out and we had grants to help us renovate Ray Park, both inside and out. We had some of the upgrades, so that was the team that was helping to work on Ray Park. And Drew Park, we have the exciting, finally, you get to see some of that, again, redevelopment of the older areas. And we have the Stadium Center retail area on Dale Mabry, and they have been rehabbing that. We have a new Econo Lodge, we have a new Spring Hill Suites, and let me make sure I've got the right suites. Hang on one second. Radisson Country Inn. And that's some of the development there. You can see the new Tivy Bet Motel. That used to be a steakhouse. And you can see how they've redone the new Econo Lodge, and the Radisson Country Suites have a pretty picture in about another month or so. Right now it's just the green board covering everything. So we're very excited about the private sector continuing in Drew Park to update and take on some of these older buildings that everything doesn't automatically have to be cleared. And we're also working on our Tampa Bay Linear Park. We've got land cleared, we've got bulldozers out there. They're now gearing up full steam to start creating the physical landscape that will be that park. And we're up to Eber. So do we have any questions on Drew Park?
Thank you.
We'll let you switch faces. You've got to press down here.
Hi, Courtney Orr, Ybor City CRA Manager. Some of the direct activities we've been involved with, the YCDC Public Safety Committee met with Tampa Police Department to address some of the concerns that the community has with the growth of the district, and that we're trying to be proactive to address the influx of development, people, businesses, types of uses that are coming in. So we are trying to be proactive with TPD to create some sort of security plan that will help address the growth that we're experiencing currently. And they're going to be coming back to our YCDC board at the end of this month to further discuss what it is that we're going to do. We did agree to pay a certain amount of money for up to 10 surveillance cameras that Tampa Police Department would direct in the RFP and the purchasing of, but it would be through our funding. So it'd be a TIF funding mechanism for the purchase of 10 cameras to be installed along 7th Avenue to help with that, the security measures. And the board, there again, TPD security measures we addressed in February. Staff is involved with working with an outside group that wants to use the Cuban Club for a multifaceted Ybor Arts Factory. So we've been working with a group that is in the brainstorming phases of this project, but it's an interesting concept that they want to bring from Havana, and it does a really phenomenal job there, so they want to replicate it as much as possible, and we're working with them to see if we can bring that to fruition sometime late summer or early fall. Staff has been working with city departments in regard to a painted intersection, but it's actually not going to be painted, it'll be spray chalk. So there will be a pride flag at the intersection of 7th Avenue and 15th Street in honor of the Tampa Pride Parade. And there will be, from my understanding, a ribbon cutting with the mayor and some sort of media attention to that. But at this point, it is a spray chalk that will go into the middle of the intersection, and it will be the colorful pride flag. One of the Strategic action plan items from our vision plan is the Adamo Drive corridor study. The communities got that on their radar as top of the list of what they would like to do from the vision plan, which is determine what that density looks like in the Adamo Drive corridor and how it can scale down to appropriately mix with the inner district of Ybor City. So we're trying to move that study forward soon. And then we've engaged the engineering company that worked with us on the completion of the 7th Avenue streetscape that takes us from 24th to 26th. That would complete 7th Avenue streetscape with the amenities, the hexagon pavers, the benches, trash cans. So all that would continue on from 24th to 26th. And we're engaging with the engineering firm again to just verify what the cost is today. The last time we had costs presented was in 2017, and so we anticipate a 10 to 20% increase in that price. So we're first trying to find out what that cost is going to be to ensure we have enough funding to do that in hopefully fiscal year 21. And that would include a new monument. So it would have some sort of significance that you have entered the eastern fringe of Ybor City. So you would recognize that you have come into East Ybor. So that would include a monument. Right now, the Culture, Arts, and Special Events Committee is tightening up the special events co-sponsorship program application. We're just trying to make sure we're in line with what the county is doing, so we've looked at the county application and cross-referencing it with ours to make sure that we're working, we're aligning our missions and our goals with what the county is putting out. We also have engaged the consultant that gave us a paver inventory that is associated with the 7th Avenue Illuminated Archway Light Project streetscape enhancement. There was a firm a couple of years ago that priced out what it would cost to improve the streetscape. There are bricks that have faded, the red bricks, so we're trying to do an overall street enhancement project that includes the archway lighting system that spans 7th Avenue currently. So we're trying to, again, update what that price would cost in association with the overall archway light project to improve the sidewalks. And interesting enough, we work closely with Lyft. There's a regional representative of Lyft, and they actually reached out to us and said that they needed to increase their location pickups because what we had currently, which is 3, is not enough. So they're in such high demand in the Ybor City area that they called and asked and wanted us to approve of approximately 9 new locations so that they can sufficiently pick up the demand that they have for requests. And we have a facade grant application that will be coming forward to you, 2234 East 7th Avenue. That will be reviewed by the underwriting committee and then presented to you soon in the next month or 2. We are working with the parking department to secure a contractor to upgrade the on-street parking signage within the district so that we can stay on top of that. Those signs get hit frequently, and so we need somebody that's regularly checking those signs and replacing any that are damaged. I'm sure you're aware that CSX upgraded some railroad intersections, and that included Ybor City. Every year, La Gaceta does a really nice article on all the positives that are happening from a development standpoint. So there was a Fiesta Day special edition last month, month of February, and we were highlighted with a large spread of all the positives that are happening in Ybor City. And from notable event standpoint, we did kick off in February with our 14 district-wide arts, cultural, and special events taking place through mid-May. And the month of February included Cuban Club Bocce Tournament, Crew of Santiago Night Parade, Home Runs in History, presented by the Museum Society, Wine and Chocolate Festival, and Fiesta Day and Parade of Flags. And that concludes my report.
Any questions for Ms. Orr? Councilman Dingfelder.
So this morning, and I can't remember exactly where we left off. I think there was a motion Folks brought this, this agreement, were you here?
Yes.
Did you see a copy of it?
I'm aware of it, as is real estate, legal, and Vanessa McCleary from the Housing Department. We have been aware of it for a few months, and so we are, I haven't gotten a recent update, but there was to be communication with the property owner.
Well, since you have such a strong, well, they're all strong, but yours is extra strong CAC. I'm just wondering, is this something that's come up in discussion with the CAC? And if not, perhaps it should.
It has not yet, no. It was real estate who was going to make that contact to the property owner. So I don't have an update, but we, as the CAC, have not discussed it.
Okay. Is it something that you would consider bringing up to them, or?
I can,
I mean-
yeah, I can put it on the agenda.
It just seems like that if, if this is something that that might help benefit the district, or the CAC feels strongly about, that they might want to, there might be some project or something that we could do there. And, it
Yeah.
looks like that, at least in the plain reading of this contract, that the developer hasn't built and the 18 months have lapsed, and the city has the option to buy it back. So maybe that's something we might want to consider.
Yeah, so we're looking at all the opportunities that we could take advantage of, whether it's incorporation of affordable housing with the development that's been approved there at that site. It was already approved by the Barrio Latino Commission a couple of years ago, and so it's going back to the developer to encourage affordable housing be incorporated, or whatever another avenue may be, whether it's the city purchasing it back. So I don't know where we stand right now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Goode.
Mr. Chairman, I addressed that this morning already in reference to legal is already looking into that.
Yes, sir.
I just had an update from Ms. Grimes that they're intentionally looking at that. And so I gather we'll be getting something back shortly as it relates to that. I think Mr. Morris is, you serve as CRA attorney now. I think you're kind of working on that, I believe.
Yes, sir. The legal department is looking at the buyback provision, option to repurchase in the contract now. And we've had conversations with real estate and with Mr. Jorge Martin, who represents the real estate division. And so we will be getting back with you regarding that provision and whether the city has any interest in pursuing that.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Orr.
Good afternoon, Board. Ed Johnson, East Tampa CRA Manager. For the month of February, direct CRA activities for East Tampa. As you recall, the CAC approved $400,000 to create the down payment assistance program, the homebuyer education program. We graduated the first class of the homebuyers education portion. We graduated 9. That's a typo here. It was really 11 residents on February 22nd. 4 of those graduates are under contract to buy a home currently. They will become the first program residents eligible for the $15,000 down payment assistance that's part of this program. The next program is under discussion. It hasn't been, the dates haven't been formalized yet for the next phase of instruction. We should be getting that in the next week or two. The East Tampa Clean Team and Youth Program, the CAC approved the $425,000 for the program, which also included $133,000 to hire 5 part-time eligible youth from the former summer youth program. Those 5 individuals have been selected and they're currently going through background checks. Employment should be beginning roughly in the next couple of weeks. Our annual summer youth program application process to hire 36 youth for the summer ended on February 29th. And of those that applied, there were actually 43, we had actually 43 applicants that applied to hire those 36. and they will start employment June 1st and run through July 23rd of 2020. Next item is the East Tampa Strategic Action Plan. We were planning to do an update today, but that was pulled from the agenda for discussion next month, at next month's CRA meeting. However, the consultants did make a formal presentation to a combined meeting of the CAC and the East Tampa Partnership this past Tuesday. We'll be getting more information to you shortly on that. Indirect activities, of course, everybody's been hearing about 34th Street. The 34th Street project has started. It started on March the 2nd. David Nelson, who was awarded the $3.7 million contract for this work, started their work at the intersections of 21st Avenue and Lake Avenue. They determined it would be best in the essence of time to move the project along to close both of those intersections at the same time to do the work there. They anticipate that this project be completed within 120 days. And as you recall, this is a safety improvement project along that corridor from Columbus to East Hillsborough, which also we're adding 3 roundabouts at that, along that corridor. And notable events, we're happy to say that Dr. Alex McDonald and his partner, Dr. Carl Richards, opened Well Done Pharmacy, an independently owned African-American business, opened at 1739 East Hillsborough Avenue. And by the way, both Dr. Richards and Dr. McDonald attended our partnership meeting this past Tuesday, and it was received very warmly. As a side note, as you see in the photograph there, Carl Richards Sr., Dr. Richards' father, he was an original employee of the former College Hill Pharmacy that was on 22nd Street that closed years ago. He was over a 20-year employee of that pharmacy, and over the years encouraged his son to enter the pharmacy business. And so now he's a partner with his son and their other partner in this endeavor. So we wish them well. And that concludes my portion.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regard to your graduates, and I don't know if this is weird or not, but maybe it'd be nice if you want to invite them down and we can give them a round of applause and acknowledge their accomplishment. I don't know. I don't know if that's strange or not, Ed, but.
No, it's not strange. I'll pass that on to our housing community development folks, because that's who we partner with to run the program. And the leader of that effort in the school, I'm sure she would be elated to have the graduates come, or as many as can come, and receive some accolades for that. I'll sure put that on the agenda.
That's okay with Mr. Chairman?
That's fine with me.
All right. We'll do
Councilman
that.
Goods.
I was happy to attend that graduation on Saturday. It was well attended. You should see the faces of those who didn't know that they could accomplish a dream.
Absolutely.
So I was able to go there and shake Miss Latasha, who's running the program, teaching the
Latasha
class. And she did an excellent job that term, and she's excited about the next class, which is starting soon, I believe.
Yes.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Rob Rosner, Downtown Manager, Channel District, Tampa Heights, and Central Park. There we go. So the first thing I'd like to report about is the RFQ that we talked about is due today, and we're starting to receive those. I don't have a queue of how many we received as yet, but they've been coming in fairly steady today. So the next portion of this is the Riverwalk improvements that are going on by the Straws. We've been working diligently with them and Parks Department and the developer to put those together. That currently is in permitting right now, and as I last checked, there's probably about a week or two before those permits are complete, and that'll be part of the phase 2 part of the work that's going to be happening. That is coordinated with them closing that portion of the street, and that work can be done at the same time so that we minimize the amount of disturbance to the area. We have worked on a maintenance traffic plan for pedestrians for when that last piece of the Riverwalk is going to have to be rerouted for a few days while they pour that last little bit. So that's all been worked through with the people involved. Moving on with Harrison Street in Franklin, you'll see that we've had on the books for Dynamic Tampa that came through for a development agreement that had its second hearing recently. That passed. So now they're in their next stages to start mobilizing and working with TICO to get temporary power for their crane and begin some of their early work for foundations. So we look forward to that project moving forward. The AER tower, the demolition is substantially complete. I don't know if you've been over there, but the annex is now gone, and they're leveling that pile off. They should be removing that for another week or two. And then the next phase of that work will be started, which is the first phase of that four-phase project is to extend Tyler over to the plaza at the Strauss. And so effectively, we're creating a cul-de-sac for that first phase, so that'll be minimal impact on the grid until some of the other work happens. That second phase is why we were trying to coordinate that early. Second phase will be a little more impactful, but we'll still have good traffic flow through there. And all that's going through the final stages of permitting here for the maintenance of traffic. So I was on the phone with that earlier today. So other notable events, we've had some visitors to our area. We had an Asian delegation that brought a number of investors to the area that were wanting to see all the different sites in our major 4 CRA areas in the downtown area. And that has yielded some specific inquiries on some sites in downtown, and I will keep you abreast of how that goes. But conversations went well, and we gave them a nice tour, very similar to what we did for the Florida Redevelopment Association. That concludes for downtown.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Councilman Goode.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Raleigh, can you tell me where we're at with Kid Mason?
Let's see, was that on the next one? No, sorry. Kid Mason, Parks Department is procuring the consultant for doing that, and the ball's in their court for following up with getting that done.
You'll give me an update next month. I know where
Absolutely.
they are, because I'm getting calls that people are excited that's happening. It's been a long time. They had their infestations thing over too, so you just give me an update how that's going too.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Happy to do that.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rob, in regard to the, what do you call it, the AER tower, give me a little update on the status of parking over there on the temporary basis and on the long-term basis. I heard some chatter that that our garage was temporarily closed, maybe for during construction or something. I don't know if that's true or not. But more importantly, do we have long-term concerns about the inadequacy of parking in that whole entertainment zone?
That's a larger question. Let me answer the first one.
Take the easy one first.
Okay. We actually met about this yesterday. The issue that came up was the Strauss has a robust valet program that they have, and they normally would stage in this area where they would be off the road but near their plaza. Because that's about to change and we're going to bring this new first phase of work in, they were trying to find a place where they could have the valet cars be stored while they do that. Our solution was to work with the garage, and no, it's not closed. So the answer to the second question is no, the garage isn't closed. The parking department is looking on doing that partnership and do that on similar programs they had. This is about a 3-month window that they're doing that in, and I'll defer to Vic and Kelly Stevens about the details of how they managed it. But generally speaking, they're going to accommodate their needs.
So in regard to the bigger long-term picture of parking issues in the area, the Straws and the new apartment and the new museums and everything else that's over there. Somebody told me we could expand the PO if possible or if necessary.
There's been some discussion about possibly adding the ability to add 2 floors to that building, and I think there was a study that someone needed to go back and find. I'm not sure if a structural integrity study had been done in which year, but I think they're looking into that. But can't say with any surety that would come anything of it.
Yeah.
But
I've got some concerns about it, especially in light of if the Strauss is continuing to expand. But I mean, I realize now people are Ubering and that's all fine and good, but some people are coming in from further away and need to park.
No, one of the things that Bob McDonough did when he was here was help negotiate extra parking in some of the nearby garages as they were developed, like Crescent Communities, which is now Novell. They built extra parking, and the Strauss did take them up on 200 extra parking spaces for that. There's also a potential for partnering with AER. They're building a significant amount of parking they may not need for all the same hours. So those partnerships are happening. Again, that's between private parties at that point, but those things have all been considered, and then we're also talking to them about parking in downtown in general. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
welcome.
Councilman Goode, do you have anything you want to say? Ask? Anyone else? Briefly, we'd heard the public this morning asking about Massey Park. Is there any updates to that and the developers going in next to the Massey Park?
Speaking of that, I spoke with, traded emails with Andrea Zellman. She's in contact with them. We'll be meeting with them on Monday. And pending that discussion, I'm not sure what's transpired from, where that is. I know that there's been discussions back and forth about how to pay for it and the scope of work, and Carlin Price had been working with the consultant to do that. So legal's been leading that charge.
Okay.
So we should know more on Monday.
Keep us informed.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Rosner.
Okay, so we'll move on to Channel District. So Channel District, we've been engaging the public on a weekly basis now with meeting with property owners for all the different segments for each one of these pieces. And I'm not going to go through each one of these, but even today on E3, E3 is one of the last ones where we're undergrounding some overhead utilities. Those are being done right now, discussing where that's going to be. And Elevate 61 has got a new funding partner, and they should be announcing soon that they're going to break ground. Some of those undergrounding was dependent on them starting, so some of that work will may move up on the schedule. The design of it is at 25%, and that's just because we have new people at TICO that just need to come up and make sure it's going to meet with their newer facilities, because we designed it maybe 3 years ago, and we just want to make sure that that equipment's still adequate. With the other ones, Twig Street is a big one. The one that's going to be we're calling it Channel Club 2 right now because the developer there doesn't have a new name for it yet, but it's going to be the old Williams Oil site. They're working right now. We're going to be coming to you with a development agreement to share in the cost of moving some of the overhead utilities for transmission, which is a higher number, but if you've been over there, there's like a 4-foot diameter steel pole that is right on the back of the curb, and it's just been there a long time. It's highly unsafe, and we're wanting to do that. It also gets the guy wires out of the right-of-way. It makes it more walkable and makes the property more developable, and it's right up our line for doing that. In the meantime, on the north side of that property, we're seeing some development from Daniel Corporation. They've got first rights on the property we call the DeMarce property. We had moved the wastewater station off that property to make it more developable, and right now they're exploring that. They've hired Stantec, and we've started those conversations about what would the streetscape go up there and how much would they be having to do as part of their responsibilities. So all the right people are happening right now. There's a very good momentum in Channel District, and things are moving along. So moving on, Madison Street Park is one of our more exciting things. You've been invited to come out on May 31st at 4 o'clock. We're going to do the ribbon cutting for that. We'll have a good lineup, and Mayor will be there as well. So please come to that. Then, as we spoke earlier today, you've already voted on it, was the Channel District CAC had voted in support of the downtowner with the things that I mentioned before, which is report to us every 2 months, and it's for 6 months flat. And after that, we'd have to talk about something totally different. Again, I mentioned about Williams Oil, and they're coming through. Again, they hired Stantec to be their engineer. Any questions before I move on to Tampa Heights?
Proceed.
Great. Direct activities in Tampa Heights, we have none directly. However, it's about the right time for us to discuss about our agreement for the 74% for the qualified debt. They've reached out to us this year with the request to go ahead and get that established. And we're working through a process to be able to do that on an annual basis to meet our requirements for the annual debt. That's part of that development agreement, which is our CRA plan. So in following up with that, TECO has been overwhelmed, and I'm sure you're just tired of seeing me saying TECO, but nothing gets built without power. Nothing gets built, nothing can stay built, and you gotta have power. So TECO is a strong partner of ours, and we're working with them to get the things they need to keep going so the development can happen. And then we're working with them on their normal permitting, and we shepherd them through whatever they need to get done. Anything before I move on to Central Park? Central Park's been a little bit quieter, and I think that Thomas Murphy gave you a better report than I'm going to give you. But Lot 9 has been sold, obviously, and recently we've had interest in Lot 10, and the developers come to us asking questions about developing that. What's interesting about Lot 10 is 25% of it's in downtown, and 75% of it is in Central Park, because the original lots, when they laid out the CRA lines, were to the back of these small lots that have all been replatted. So Lot 10 is technically half in, half out. That concludes my report.
Any questions? Councilman Dickfelder.
Thank you. Could you go back a slide, Rob?
Oh,
Yep.
lost track.
So
For Tampa Heights?
Yes.
Okay.
So translate that top paragraph for my benefit, because I
Okay.
don't think I was there for that negotiation necessarily. So
All right.
what is that? Who's paying who? How much is it? And et cetera.
Okay.
How long does it last?
So Tampa Heights is a little different.
Yeah, it is.
The CRA has an agreement with the CDD for that. Soho owns all the lots in that CDD. And if they were to sell or buy pieces of it, there would be multiple parties to the CDD. So whoever owns it still is responsible for providing what's called the qualified debt, which is all the things that are public infrastructure that they can do. Now, right now, to the tune of about $18 million is what they've bonded. That's their qualified debt. That's what we pay 74% to per our agreement. So that
When was that agreement struck?
I think it was 2004 is when the first one, and then we redid it again when the developer walked away, and we had Soho pick up from there. And forgive me on the dates, but I believe it was 2007.
So we pay what percentage of the,
It's 74%
and d-
of TIF revenue for that year, for each year. And we've been storing it up because they haven't done enough to count as qualified debt. They just recently did all their bonds, which is one of the things that was necessary for them to be qualified for it.
okay. And do we approve of those projects as they go? So we have some control over that, or?
Well, the master plan with all the infrastructure was approved at the time of the CRA. When this developer came through, it was contingent upon approvals through planning and development and all those pieces. And I'd be happy to share them with you, but it's part of what's in the CRA plan is what's being built. So final technical drawings were approved later, obviously, but that was through our normal process.
So you might have said this a minute ago, but how much do we anticipate this first payment's gonna be?
Well, we have about $387,000 from previous years, and this current year is around $600,000. It'd be 74% of that. I don't have the exact number.
Thank you.
Did you want to comment?
No, just tell me it's 18 million that
Right. Okay, so in the 30 years that is remaining, or in the life of the CRA, we may never pay all of the debt on the 18 million, but there's 23 total. The first set of bonds was for 18, and there'll be another one coming for about 5 million. So again, hopefully we pull in enough TIF between now and the end of the CRA to pay all the bonds, but that's how it was pledged.
So there's no recourse for them if we don't?
If the world went great and the values went through the roof and we paid off early, then once we're paid all the qualified debt, CRA would not need to exist because it was one development agreement, because all the public infrastructure was built, and that's what was committed to.
But on the flip side, if we didn't pay it off, there's no recourse for them to come
No.
back against the CRA, their city, or anything like that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Anyone
Mr. Chair.
else? Thank you, Mr. Rosner.
You're welcome.
We'll move to agenda item number
Mr.
5.
Chairman, before we get to that, I forgot during the East Tampa presentation, I received several calls in reference to the environmental pond at 26th Avenue. Do we know what they're doing over there, Mr. Johnson? They said there's been several dump trucks over there. Can we find out about that and just send something tomorrow?
Probably, but I'll check it out.
You just send me an email to the office. Thank you.
So, good afternoon again, Michelle Van Loan. I will try to make a budget discussion as exciting as possible for you. I can't pull off miracles all the time, but we are going to try. Let me see if I can get the podium. Let's see. I don't know what that will do. We'll get them to figure out how do you turn on, how do I get this one on? So I have budget handouts for you. Actually, I have it closed. So before we get into all of the details, because of several questions I've been getting from many of you individually about different CRAs, where are we at, what does it look like? When you see the quarterly report, you see these big balances. So we wanted to have a discussion with you about each of the CRAs and their budgets, where we currently are and where do we think we will be for the next few years. And I just wanted to put this budget history up here to sort of explain why you see some of these big buckets. And just right off the bat, I'm going to use East Tampa as an example. If you look at East Tampa in the middle and you look at the revenue history, we were at very little, next to nothing, and the growth was slow, and then we were at 1.1, 1.8, and it's only in the past year or two that we are starting to see those large dollars. If we were just in FY 16 and 17, we might not have understood, and we definitely didn't understand, we might already be at $4 million for this budget year based on where we had been in the past, over those past 5-6 years and coming out of the recession. So we did not have at that time already geared up large projects to be able to start thinking, oh, I'm going to have millions of dollars to start spending. And so 2019 for most of the CRAs has been a building, gear up, and development year. So a lot of what we're going to talk about as we go through these budgets, and we keep bringing up, the subcommittees are meeting. East Tampa has been coming to you for the past several months with new programs. Now that we see the kinds of revenues we're bringing in, we can now start planning a little bit more accurately for the future of what we can do with these dollars. But given our history, we weren't looking at preparing for the types of bigger projects or being able to fund the kind of programs we find that we can now fund affordable housing and some of the others.
Yes, Councilman.
So, since this came out and we've all been talking about it, everything in the world has changed. Are you working with a CFO or someone to do some sensitivity tests to these as we go forward? Do we property values, I think, can't drop below a certain floor anyway. So if
yes, they can. What do you mean they can't drop below a certain floor?
Okay.
So if you look at East Tampa,
Yeah.
see those 2 years of zero? That's when the entire value of all the properties in East Tampa dropped below the base year. So there was no increment whatsoever.
Okay.
So we brought in no revenue during those years.
So I imagine you guys are doing some sensitivity modeling, right?
Right now, we are not.
Okay.
We keep, as you've mentioned several times, for the past 2 years, most economists talk about us being on the cusp of recession yet again. And when is it going to come? Will it be precipitated now by current events? So when we look at how much we're just projecting for revenues for the next few years, we took a very conservative approach. If it grows well beyond that, that's great. We can plan for that. We're hoping at least, but we just used from the budget office a 5% growth in revenues across the board as an average. But we're not going beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
So again, this is a document I just wanted you to have so that you can understand where we came from as far as how we approach where we're going to. I've got your packet in order, but I am gonna ask to skip ahead to Ebor. Courtney has another meeting she has to attend to that she does not control the schedule, so she's not able to reschedule that. So in case you have any questions for Ebor, so going to the first Ebor page for Ebor 1. There we go. So at the top, we started FY19 with that fund balance of a little over $1 million. You can see we had our revenues. I've highlighted in green for all the CRAs. When you see that revenue, you can see what portion comes from the county and the port who contribute to our TIF revenues. When we ended 2019, we had a fund balance of 1.5 million that then got carried forward. So what we've done with this is moving forward and projecting forward. We show at the top what that carry forward budget. So again, that 1.5 million is carry forward. We have about 2.3 million as our 2020 budget. And in the middle, one of the questions we had, we use the line item for neighborhood infrastructure as a capital improvements bucket. During the year and during our programming, we don't start the year knowing all the exact costs. We have not had a policy of just saying, oh, we think it'll be 3 million, so we'll go ahead and budget 3 million. We wait until we start getting our engineers or architects' estimates, and then we budget. We budget for the design at that point, and once our design team has an estimated construction budget, we come to reprogram the construction budget. So until such time as our strategic action plan consultant fees, our actual programs for housing are developed with the criteria, we don't come to you to reprogram that money. So that money sits in these buckets. What we've done for this purpose is, again, for planning and projections, is to look at what are the projects we have already started, we are currently discussing, and many of the CRAs have a new strategic action plan update. Ebor is one of them. So we have not put into the spreadsheet because the CAC is still in the process of prioritizing and looking at where is our money, what projects do we want to do next out of our strategic action plan. So I've included that peach at the bottom that says there will be projects that will be added as their subcommittees continue to meet, and then start filling in those buckets and coming back to you for reprogramming. But as you see at the bottom, in 2024, after our planned projects that are currently known, they're already designed, they're already committed, it's already standard program we're going forward with, they would have about 2.7 million of leftover funds with no new projects from their strategic action plan by the end of 2024. So we wanted to give you all of the details for each of the CRAs, to have this in front of you to digest, and then we can come back with more detailed or meet with you individually on deeper questions, and of course today.
Quick question, please.
One of my questions that I had sent to you was, are we banking this money for something in particular? You kind of alluded to that last year versus this year, but as we get way out in the future, are there kind of unwritten big projects that folks are thinking about that we want to spend money on, or is it just really just depend on what comes up?
It's going to depend on the CAC. So right now, many of them refer to parking studies or the Adamo corridor study. So once they get through some of those studies, then they may come back with capital improvement projects. So each SAP, especially these updated ones, will have specific projects, some of them infrastructure, and some of them will be planning studies and programs. In Ebor, where did she go? Ebor 2, we have one project that under Ebor 2, they couldn't afford in 1 year. So part of it will be, so we don't have much of a balance in Ebor 2. So some of the infrastructure projects they do have, we haven't been able to fully fund in 1 year. And we can come back with, here were the recommendations from the strategic action plan, again, sort of in a succinct list to show you what's on the agenda and horizon that they're looking at.
Thank you.
Anything else? Councilman Goods.
I'm just looking through all of them. The interest. How are we holding the interest? And do the CAC boards know about this interest money? And can that be allocated at any time? Because I'm looking at this interest sitting here, so tell me about the interest.
When when the money, just like in your personal accounts, when we have money that's sitting in the account waiting to be spent, whether you have a balance at the end of the year or not, that money gets allocated, it sits there, and we spend it down during the year. That interest then accumulates. That interest is tracked and held separately, and it still is CRA dollars that has to be held. It can be reprogrammed. Generally, the policy for the CRAs is unless we had something that we couldn't fund out of regular budgets, we would go to the interest. After we had the recession, that interest became, that's our reserves. Should we run into problems in the future, if there was a big project coming online that we did not have enough money to spend, but that's sort of the very last bucket that we would want to go to as policy.
Thank you.
And it does show up every quarter on your quarterly report. So it does show up on all of our financial reports and everything that we do.
Any other questions?
I'll then go to EBOR 2. So again, at the 2019, they had a balance of $445,000. They took in about 508. By the end of the year, they had 809,000. We carried that back up. This is the smaller of the two EBOR CRAs. And again, you can see those projects, the ongoing salaries, of course, their YES team. Every year they make their fairly small projects, but Corrine handles doing signage updates, the pressure washing, the fixing of the bricks, the fixing of the sidewalk. We contribute to fixes at the EBOR Central Garage. So all of those little projects, we just, we're fixing the clock at the Central EBOR Garage. So all those little projects that are too small to put in lots of little line items get lumped in there. The extra streetscaping that she does when they have to replace items that get damaged. The archway lights preservation project, that's in part of both CRAs. Your infrastructure needs grant, that was a new grant that just got re-upped last year that they brought to you. Again, funding the facade grant and the streetcar operations that several of the CRAs contribute to.
Councilman Carlson.
One of the things we've heard over and over from the community is that CRA money should not be used to pay for things that the city would normally pay for.
Okay.
Does the city own that garage, and why wouldn't the repair money come out of the city budget instead of CRA budget?
For CRAs, we pay for what we consider enhanced services. And so anything that goes above and beyond what we would do at standard facilities, we tend to pay for. So that includes things like the YES team. So in East Tampa, we spend about $300,000 to pay for a team that does litter cleaning, right-of-way mowing, graffiti abatement that goes
But like
much
on the
faster.
parking garage, fixing the clock and fixing the bricks and things, shouldn't that be out of the parking budget instead?
May, if I. Courtney, well, no, please, Courtney, please, come up here. It was years ago when an agreement was struck between the city and Ybor City that there was no parking meters, or the parking meters would be taken away. That we would go ahead and do some work on the parking garages, is that correct?
That's correct. So every year we put aside $50,000 was the agreement. So every year we have $50,000 allotted to parking garage improvements, whether it be the restrooms, repairing the clock towers, but Joe's correct.
That was our agreement with the city that you take away the parking meters, we'll take care of little things in the garage. Yes.
50, yeah. We never exceed the 50. And in last couple of years that I've been here controlling the budget, we've actually gone less than 50 a few years.
Thank you, Courtney. Anybody else? Councilman Dingfelder.
Just generically across, I guess this question would apply to lots of different districts. In terms of our projections, the money that we're projecting that we're gonna take in, and you've got three, 4, 5 year projections here. Would you describe those as conservative, as related to all the crazy construction that's going on all over the place?
We did it, again, we being the budget office. The budget office felt comfortable with about 5%. We were very lucky in 2019 that across the CRAs, we were just shy of 19% growth. But we also came out of, as my original chart showed, the amount of time it took us to come out of the recession was much longer than the rest of the city. And then suddenly we went gangbusters. So it took us a long time to gear up. We feel comfortable with the 5%. Should we actually run into a recession, we would hope they would take a little bit of time, again, because our property tax revenue is a lagging indicator. So property values first have to start going down, and they don't tend to go down all in 1 year, usually, hopefully. And so that property tax would decline slower over a period of time. And again, we collect our revenues on the back end of that. So again, it's a little bit slower, except for, again, the recession we had back in 07, 08. That was obviously an anomaly. We hope not to see that again in our lifetimes. But 5% growth right now, we feel comfortable we can attain. Anything beyond that, we were getting a little bit more speculative, and we didn't want to present numbers that we didn't think we could live up to. So if they go more than that, we know we have more money, but we expect at least to make that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, back in order. We're going to start with Channel District, and you just saw this as part of Rob's presentation. Every month, Rob gets up here and shows you all these projects in Channel District, and you notice almost all of them are in design. So that means we're in the process of paying for the smaller cost of getting these projects done, your engineering and your architecture. You've also seen these, which is the map. We have a website dedicated to it that shows what this translates to, all these different sections that they're doing and giving the timelines for the construction. If you look at those timelines, the construction schedule says 19, late 20, early 20, and 21, and finishing up in 22. So the current budget does not yet reflect all of those construction costs because we are still in engineering and design for these projects. So when you look at the budget for Channel District and you see we started FY19 with a $13 million balance. We ended the year with $17 million, and now you will see that's going to start to go down. So we go down to 11 and then 7. I only projected Channel District to FY21 because by FY21 we will have bid out and started or completed construction on all of the projects that mostly remain in their strategic action plan. All of the projects that are feasible to be built that don't get into much bigger policy questions regarding moving forward, going beyond the list of projects that are in their strategic action plan will have been at least started, if not completed, by the end of fiscal year 2021. These are, again, estimates of construction that we've listed. These are all the projects with an estimated timeline based on where we are in the architecture and engineering planning of these projects. And those numbers could go up or down because, as you saw, some of them are only in 25 or 50% engineering, and until we actually bid them, we don't know what those numbers are. So that $7 million balance could go up or down depending on the construction bids. When you look at that $7.2 million, you have to remember the money at the top in green is not city TIF. That is what we got from the county and the port. So if we get at some point in Channel District that we are no longer using the CRA to do projects in that CRA, any monies left over for the ends of those projects would be then split back up between the port, the county, and the city. And any ending revenue, if you're looking at what the city would get back, our revenue would be what you see at the top right now at 4.2 projected in 2021, not the full $7 million.
Councilman Carlson.
And I apologize. I sent like 2 or 3 pages of questions, and I'll follow up with you and try to have that longer conversation. But I think this meeting was so that she wouldn't have to do this 7 times as much. But on the money that's out there right now, are there any other kinds of commitments that just like we were talking about in Ybor, I think it was, are there other ideas, that studies that are being done, things that you think people are kind of penciled into their head that might need to be done?
The big question, which is a huge policy question, and there is no consensus on this, and it would have to be a major policy question for all of you as the CRA board. Previously, the port has come asking for the city to come build some of their proposed big parkland projects, some of their big idea to be built on port property. That had never, the need to have the port property developed has always been assumed, but what role the CRA would put into subsidizing that would be the big question. But we don't have any developer agreements, like you've seen in some of the other CRAs. We don't have anything where we're owing anybody or that anybody else is doing our infrastructure that then we are paying them back.
Yeah, just to quickly comment on that, the port knows that I'm very opposed to developing. I told you this before too. I'm very opposed to converting port land to development. It's a short-term gain to build condos, but then after that, it's a lot of low-paying jobs. And in that district, we have about 800 very high-paying jobs. And the further we encroach on that, the bigger the risk that we're going to lose it. And I think we shouldn't turn it into low-paying retail space and condo space. But anyway, one last question. We can, if we put a cap, for example, on one of these, we can go to the county and try to sign an interlocal agreement to agree to jointly spend money for a certain period of years on a certain project, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we could say we're going to spend our $3 million. We want you to spend $2 million on a certain thing. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilman Diekfelder.
I don't know if you're probably not in here when we do our city, our typical day in the city in terms of our agendas and that sort of thing. But very often the question of WMBE arises in terms of the pipes we're putting in elsewhere in the city. Has nothing to do with CRA. But now that I'm sitting here looking at these projects, these are CRA funded projects. I guess we probably use the city staff to do our contracting and perhaps our WIMBY efforts. But do you get separate WIMBY reports from the city staff on these, for example, these channel-side projects? Do you have a handle on the WIMBY successes? I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, and I apologize for throwing this at you without any warning.
No, that's fine.
But maybe since we are an independent body, maybe we can strike our own separate WIMBY goals for CRA-funded projects.
Okay, so I'll take 3 different questions there. So the first one is
I lost track of the question.
That's okay, I didn't. So the first question or the first comment was all of our projects go through the exact same process the city projects do. So we have the same reporting, they use the same exact forms, same exact criteria for WIMBY that all other city projects go through. So that's the first part. Secondly, no, we have not asked them to report back on an aggregate or average or per thousand, what are we looking at? We can certainly do that. They have the ability to run those ports and we can ask that. I believe on our slide, our contract, the proposed contract with GAI for the East Tampa Strategic Action Plan, you have this, and it's also my transmittal letter to you on that contract. Of the $328,000, more than 31% of it is WIMBY contract. So more than a third of that contract, or approximately a third of that contract, is all going to minority businesses as part of that contract. So we do get those numbers, we do see it, but we just have not asked them to run the reports to look at it in a more global perspective for the CRAs. Lastly, I'll let Mr. Massey answer your last question about could we establish our own WIMBY requirements and goals different than the city.
State law mandates that we follow the same purchasing process and procedures that the city does. It's one of the changes that the legislature recently made in 2019.
Do you think that necessarily carries over?
Yes. We have to follow the exact same process and procedures that the city follows.
Well, I understand Chapter 287 used to be a government purchasing agent myself, but I don't know that purchasing procedures as compared to WIMBY procedures necessarily have to be the same.
Well, I believe.
I guess we can
We'll
talk
talk
about
about that, but I think the intent of the legislature was to make sure that the CRAs follow the same process and procedures when they went out to contract for improvements that the city does, or the governing authority does.
Anyway, we'll continue to have that discussion, because like I say, I mean, I think we all sort of made some strong efforts to note that we are an independent body, and you know, and with that, perhaps comes an opportunity to do even a better job on minority business opportunities than the city as a whole. So we'll keep at it. Thank you.
Any more questions on Channel District? Are you all still awake? That's why I watch the city budget hearings from my desk. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, moving on to downtown. I just wanted, we showed you some of these when we came to you, and you were kind of like, why do we need a facade grant in downtown? So I just wanted to remind you that downtown does go beyond Kennedy and along the waterfront, and that we do have a lot of buildings all over downtown. Once you get up by Polk and Tyler and parts of Cass and going those full ways, we do have a lot of downtown that still looks like this and still does have a ways to go before it even looks like an average downtown versus some of the glossy high-rises that we're used to seeing. So I just wanted to, as we talk about some of these projects and what is there left to do in downtown, I just wanted to keep some of those images in the back of your minds.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, would you say that still is representative of blight?
Oh, yes, we have, I don't want to guess a percentage because I haven't driven it where I'm driving every street, but I would say most of those segments, you can't go more than 2 or 3 blocks without seeing a boarded up, empty building, dilapidated throughout that area. And it's not just like one block. And we've seen even Franklin, where the development has been heading north, it's still heading north a lot slower. And some of these buildings are adjoining some of the park space, the bus depot, all around. We have the Metro 510 or 210? 510, sorry. I have too many numbers in my head. But Metro 510, you've got our transportation, and yet it's still surrounded, even with that density of apartments there, the retail around there has not been coming up anywhere near, well, not even to the same degree, just we're not seeing it. Hopefully now, as we start getting more into Herman Massey Park, some of the developments up there on the west side of that northern downtown, we hope that it will start moving over to the east. But it has been a much slower growth.
And do we go all the way to the train station in terms of the CRA?
To Union Station?
Yes,
Yeah.
it
So
actually goes all the way up to the north side of, to Gasworks. It's just like following the rail line.
Councilman Goods.
To the north, downtown CRA goes with Scott.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's right at the interstate then.
No, doesn't it pass, go
Scott
just
goes-
past it?
Past the
It goes
interstate?
across Scott, goes down around Perry Harvey, follows Cass, I'm sorry. So it goes Scott over to Orange, south on Orange, up Cass, follows the south side of Encore, and then follows Nuncio all the way up to Gasworks, and then back down. So the Selman is the break between Channel District and downtown.
And then Central.
And there's a
picks up-
gap between that and Ybor.
And then Central picks up on the east side, right?
I'm
Central
sorry?
Park.
Central Park is a hole in the middle, goes a chunk out of it. So,
Pardon me. Thank you, sir.
Councilman Carlson.
Not going to beat this drum as much as I have in the past, but I'm opposed to the facade grants, and not because those buildings couldn't look nicer, but if we had to spend $50,000 or whatever, I think that there would be other better ways that we could use the money, and one in particular would be contributing it to some kind of affordable housing fund. So.
And I'm glad you brought that up. That's the perfect segue.
1 second. Sorry.
Thank you.
Councilman Vera.
And thank you. And I saw over there the old Woolworth store was there.
Press.
Yeah. What are the plans, if at all, for that The Woolworth store, I know there was a historical marker put up there recently.
What was the question, I'm sorry?
What are the plans for the old Woolworth store where there was recently a historical marker placed there for the sit-ins that happened about 60 years ago? Just piqued my interest just looking at that.
Well, it's interesting because we get different developers come with different options, and it's all about the sale of it and if the owner was going to sell or not. So we have interest of redeveloping, and other ones want to knock down portions of it and add to it. Ask me every 6 months, I'll give you a different answer. Okay.
So are there any proposals to knock down that building or?
No one wants to knock down the Woolworths or the.
I was gonna say, okay, glad I
Or the
misunderstood.
Caress building.
Okay.
But portions of it is like, one of the options was, well, we could make so many floors of parking and then build above that and keep the
Okay.
streetscape. But,
Yeah, I
so-
hope we can see
all
a
of them have
restoration of that. I mean, because we have a beautiful historical marker out there, but the building itself looks awful. And I know we're limited in what we can do, but I just hope to see some sort of a useful restoration of that can better mark historically what occurred there and throughout Tampa.
Yeah, there was an ownership battle that
Yeah.
kind of held that up for a number of years, and now it's in different hands, so we'll see what happens.
Great. Thank you for answering my
You're welcome.
question.
Just
Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to chime in on that, I recall a fairly controversial historic preservation action by the city in regard to the facade of the Crest building a number of years ago. So I think there are some historic preservation ramifications
Oh,
to
there are.
anybody who wants to develop that.
I'm not personally astute with the knowledge on that particular issue, but I'm pretty sure you're right, and that's one of the things that's slowed those negotiations down, because some people don't want to do as much as what's probably required, so.
Thank you.
Councilman Carlson.
Just one more short thing. I remember years ago when it was pretty much just the aquarium in the channel side area. There was a lot of hand wringing about why the area wasn't developing, and one of the things that people were saying is that the landholders were trying to hold on for the biggest price in the future, and if that was true, you couldn't blame them for wanting to do that. But as you look down Franklin Street and some of these other areas, the area around Jackson House and others, there's a lot of land banking going on, and we can talk about this offline, but I wonder if there's some kind of incentive to get people to develop or sell land sooner than later instead of land banking.
Well, we try to do that as much as we can without giving a direct incentive. Sometimes it's us reaching out and saying, hey, there's people that are interested in your property and making them aware of it. And sometimes that synergy is where that comes from.
Because I think that's why some of the facades don't look good, because the owners are just holding them for a long run, right?
Correct, and so that's one of the reasons for the facade program was to, well, if we could help get the next one to invest in it, or, hey, I've got somebody interested, there's this grant that can help you if you were to buy here and you can invest and you have some help. So some of that has been a carrot, but not a huge carrot, so. Any questions before I let Michelle go back to what she was presenting?
Anyone else?
Okay.
So on downtown, which is of keen interest to many of you. So we started FY19 with a $17 million budget. We added another 18, but again, this time the green for downtown, the green is not TIF. The green is money coming in from the county that they have dedicated specifically for the convention center or also to help assist with the SPP agreement. So that money is more of a pass-through. You see it at the top in the green, and then it goes right back out for those two line items. So when you see that 22 million, the actual revenue for the TIF is only at about the 15 million. Your 14,722 for the city under FY20, and then the 249,000 from the port. Again, these are all of the projects that we have now expanded out that had just been in capital improvement. The timing for these projects, again, many of these are either under construction or under design for projects, and you can see the timing of those. The Peach and the Cross Bay Ferry, that has always been a year to year. We started out with a $350,000 contribution. It's gone down over the years. They come back to us every time, so that's something that you as City Council and CRA agree to that contract or not, and then agree to fund or not. So that's why I kind of left that one in Peach, as it's a soft commitment in that you make that decision on a yearly basis. You can see all the other projects. I just want to point out a couple, just while you have us here to interact because of some of the complications, and they're not as straightforward. So you can see the convention center meeting rooms. As Rob mentioned, we are getting bids on that today. So while you look at that very large balance, we started with 18 million, you can see that we are going to be spending 16 million of that right off the bat towards that project. And then we also have the commitment for the renovations in the chillers. The chillers will be about, just the chillers alone will be about 9 to 12 million, and that will be phased in also. So you see a lot of these projects that, because of the timing of the convention center business, we can't just shut the building down and do it all at once or shut it down for 2 years. So many of these improvements we have to do over time and phase so that we can keep the convention center up and running. Down where you see the SPP infrastructure agreement, up to 100 million. So we just want to be very clear about what this agreement is. This agreement is strictly for infrastructure. It is not for any work on their private property. It was infrastructure improvements that were going to be needed in order to handle the capacity of anybody's high rises and buildings in this area as it gets developed. Prior to this development coming in, we had a lot of cave-ins. We had capacity issues with our water lines. So it wasn't just aging wastewater or stormwater facilities. We didn't have the capacity in our water lines, and they were aging water lines. So this infrastructure was needed, but the city did not have the financial capacity to build it fast enough for the development that was coming in downtown. And so the CRA agreed to help fund that and to let SPP build it at the same time as all their construction, and we reimburse them, again, strictly for infrastructure that is all adjacent to their project. We have agreed, and the agreement is up to 100 million worth of infrastructure work. They do come back to the city for each section of work that they plan to do. That does get agreed to, and they have to come back with all of their receipts, just as if they were invoicing someone, before they get paid back. We've already seen the bills, and you can see FY19 had an actual payout of 9.8 million. We just estimated 10 million because, again, the bills can fluctuate up and down over the years. So just for planning purposes, we did it flat. And it would, if we did the full 100 million, again, it's up to 100 million. If there isn't enough infrastructure work to reach the 100 million, then they get up to the amount of work that they actually do. And that would end at 10 million each year out to about 2027 fiscal year. Again, depending on how those payments go.
Councilman Carlson.
As I understand it, it's 50 million to the city and 50 million to the county. Is that because the CRA is already split up? Is that right? Or it's 100 million just for the city?
No, it's split, right?
It's split.
Yeah. So what happened is, and that's when we said you've got that pass-through up on top. So they are giving us that 5 million each year. We put in the 5 million each year, and so you see the 10 million. So they are giving us that 5 million, and again, that number may fluctuate as far as what the actual payout is each year.
And in the agreement, you said up to 100 million, but if there's not enough work to do, it's just whatever the cost is done.
If it's 60 million, 70
was there a
million,
prescribed plan of work, or was it just whatever they need under 100 million?
No, it's prescribed.
There's a prescribed list. Okay, we'll talk about it later. Thank you.
Yeah, and we can get into that detail. And again, all of these are public documents. We're happy to share any of them if you want to get down into the weeds or have a conversation behind the scenes. We can explain any of that. Let me see so again, you have your operating streetcar contributions that are a commitment. We are paying off the debt service in order to pay some of the convention center improvements. We didn't have all the cash right up front. We did take out that bond. That loan that we took out also indicated our commitment to the county that we were moving forward with these improvements so that they would then agree to continue to fund them. Also, you will see that the debt payments do end in fiscal year 22. So we are making that in the upfront payments, that debt payment all the way through FY22. When you get to the bottom, the first peach one, potential land purchase for affordable workforce housing. As we showed you, there is still land available north of Kennedy, north of Madison. The CAC did authorize CRA staff that should there be an opportunity for affordable housing, that the CAC does want to pursue that. So we did put $10 million in there. We just allocated it across, so those numbers don't really mean anything besides if we did try to acquire something for affordable housing, you would have that first outlay of capital. But we just put out there knowing how much land is going for, or if some other developer was doing something and we had to incentivize more of a workforce affordable housing. So we are looking with this budget to come up with and this is just staff right now. We didn't go to the CAC with 10 million. We were just showing you what's affordable. What can the downtown CRA afford to potentially put towards such a project?
Councilman Dingfelder.
It's an interesting question, sort of a big picture philosophical question. I know every single one of us is for affordable housing. I think we're gonna do everything we can over the next, 3 to 7 years, to do more affordable housing, either co-funded or funded by the city. But what I wonder is it wise to pay this, probably the most expensive prices in the city for land for affordable housing, as opposed to, as Mr. Carlson suggested, possibly figure out a way to take this money via a cap or what have you, and actually build affordable housing with the $5 million or the $10 million, whatever it is, somewhere else where land might be a little cheaper. I just, I'm not trying to shove affordable housing into some other neighborhood or anything like that. I just don't know if, the amount, what is land selling for, per acre or per square foot or whatever,
10 million.
In this downtown area as compared to other parts.
It's running anywhere from, at the very, very low end is, I'm sorry, can you hear me better? It's running from the low end of the $60 a square foot all the way up to about $150 a square foot for land in downtown. And it depends on where it is, and if it's adjacent to the river or a major roadway. Obviously, northern downtown, the prices start going down. So in the southern part of downtown, it's around 10 million an acre, if you do the math. Other parts of downtown, it's $1.5 million to 5 million. Just depends on where, what the conditions are, what the neighbors are, if there's an environmental issue, if there's any other, liens or things that.
I just, without putting you on the spot, anecdotally, I can't help but think that if you're not downtown, the prices will be much less.
Land's not a whole lot cheaper around the rest of the city, but it obviously would be more expensive in downtown. So land in just north of downtown is still going at a fairly good pace, so it's not like half or a third or a tenth, so.
Mr. Johnson, you help us out?
If I may throw in, you make a very valid point, Councilman Dingfelder. However, there's going to be a huge influx of workforce down here in downtown Tampa. With all the work that SPP is doing, we're bringing 3,000 new residents in here. They're going to need the workforce of restaurant people. They're going to hairstylists, other type of working people that are going to need some place to live down here in downtown Tampa. That's just my opinion.
Agreed, it's a philosophical question that is good. The difference, some of the concepts are, if you look in West Tampa right now, what it would cost to get a whole acre of land, and how many houses you would have to buy or where you would put that. You also can do a higher density with a taller building in the downtown area. So while you're paying more for the acre price, you're able to put more units on that than you might be able to do out in East Tampa. Drew Park, a high-rise wouldn't exactly fit in with that community. Even in Ybor and most of the historic district, you can't go over 3 or 4 stories. So if you're looking for a density of a workforce, affordable housing, while the land may be cheaper, you also have the opportunity to do a lot more with it. And so there's a lot that, again, if we get to that point and there is a concept that is available to pursue, we can have that discussion more fully about is that the right direction to go or not.
All right, if I could just finish that up with Mr. Johnson. Ed, is there how do you ballpark land in East Tampa perhaps in terms of per square foot or per acre, what have you?
Ed Johnson, East Tampa CRA manager. Yes, it's quite different. when you start talking about the price of land in downtown versus a residential community. However, the cost of land in East Tampa is constantly rising. That's the real reason why our TIF dollars are increasing, because it's based on property values. Our property values, when we were at 0 or below the baseline, we weren't getting but $10,000 for a 50 by 100 lot, in East Tampa. Today, you're paying $80,000 for that same lot. So, when you start comparing, apples to apples based on size and the land use as was discussed, property values are high everywhere. So it's not that it's cheaper to build in East Tampa versus downtown. It's the type of development that you're talking about building.
I just want to make sure we get the most bang for our buck. So,
And we want to continue to have property values increase, because that's what we live off of. Our CRAs are based on the incremental difference in the rise in property values. So that's what we want to see happen. We want property values to increase, not decrease.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson,
Councilman Goods.
I think that's what we have to educate the public about the CRAs. I think there's not a lot of education going on of what the CRA's purpose is and how money is allocated for the CRAs. And a lot of people don't understand that those CRA dollars only come from those property taxes. And if there's no property tax at a value that is very, very low, then there's no CRA dollars. You just don't get any dollars. And Mr. Johnson, he is right, since the property value has increased, you've gotten some CRA dollars, because before property values were low and we were not getting any dollars in the CRA to do any building, to do anything. So I do understand that as going back, looking at the records. But I would say, as far as to downtown and density, we have to look at that, because you can get more done going up. You can get more people, housing, be it workforce, be it local, however you want to call it, you can get more housing done. But I think we need to look at what the stock is. And I don't know, we've had a survey done to see what is that northern portion of downtown stock is, how many empty buildings we have that are used buildings that we can look to start partnering with some people to do some work. Even in East Side, there are a lot of big time buildings there that are sitting there rotting. So I suggest we need to look at, gentlemen, looking at a survey to looking at the stock we have in our CRAs or around the city generally, to see what density we already have, and now we can start maybe developing that, partnering with others to do that. And I think that's going to be another goal we really need to look at, looking what stock we have, and that being said, we'll be able to help the people more.
And the mayor's affordable task force is looking at that. For those of you who heard her presentation or have read the report, one of the biggest challenges they said we had at all levels was at the low income, the moderate to low income, your workforce housing, your lower working class housing, all of that across the city, and they've identified what they perceive as the gap, doing it now geographically, like with a heat map of showing what types of housing are. And even when Mr. Robinson got up at the last CRA board meeting and talked about the RFP for the 18 acres, he had just received an email from Leroy Moore at the Tampa Housing Authority saying, we're already at this percentage, we need to mix up the percentage. And now Mr. Robinson's not asking, we don't want 100% or 80% low-income housing as part of that. We need a better mix to look at what is the mix in that entire area, so that as a holistic standpoint for West Tampa and that section of West Tampa, we are looking at the full mix and not just an individual developments mix.
Because you'll have an equal balance of all people in that area, no matter where it is. Is an equal balance of white people, black and brown people. So I understand that that's what the world is going to now. But my thing is, we just have to make sure, when I drive through East Tampa every day and I see blue tarps all over the place. And I made that clear to Ms. McClary. She knows how I feel about that the rehab program that the city has is really not working. It's working for a very, very small few and not working for all. And that's why I said the CRA dollars, we just can't have that going to a city-type program. We have to develop a different program to help those who are falling deeply into that crack. And I still say We've got to come up with that plan. I haven't seen anything yet or anything, but we've got to develop that money we have for rehab. That just can't be mixed with state and federal dollars. That's got to be in a separate account to help those people who are in that deep crack because of if the house is more than what we say we can. The policy is to fix or whatever. I mean, we have to look at how can we help those people get out of that house, prefab, whatever we need to do to look at how can we help those folks. Because when grandma who's 67 years old and the roof is dilapidated, now all the drywall, what does she do? Everyone's getting sick from the mold in the house and so forth. There is stock in East Tampa. There's stock all over the city. We just have to make sure we survey what those stocks are and go and rehab those stock items that we have, and you'll keep the assets in those communities. So that's my thing going forward, looking at what we have and dealing with what we have.
In both West Tampa and East Tampa, as you've seen, we've already started to bring programs before you. We've still got 2 more in development in West Tampa. Natasha has been working with the Housing Committee. So we are looking at addressing that so that we can meet as many of those gaps as we can.
Councilman Carlson.
Back to the affordable housing line item, and you talk about land purchases. If the CRA buys land, is it owned by the CRA or owned by the city?
It's technically held in the name of the city but controlled by the CRA. So if land is paid for by CRA dollars, then there are certain procedures by state statute that land then has to go through. It doesn't just go into a pot of city land.
And then this is maybe a conversation for another day, but one of the piece of feedback I've gotten, and I saw when I lived in Singapore and other places, that cities, especially with valuable, scarce land downtown, typically will lease land instead of selling it. Like the land next door, I think we sold that outright, right? And so does the city ever lease? And have you seen models where CRAs will lease land, and maybe that's a way of subsidizing the affordable housing also?
That also is one of the concepts in the mayor's affordable housing task force. And like you saw in Singapore, a lot of that would be our version of a land bank. You develop your high rise, and in Singapore they talk about how high the homeownership is, but it's not homeownership in the way we define it. They have a 99-year lease. That lease can be inherited by children or grandchildren, but it's a 99-year lease. So and for their purposes, you have homeownership, but it is still controlled by that housing authority. And so land banking is how, for us, legally, we get through and we do that. And you also then can control what the costs are of that housing moving forward.
Councilman Goode.
And that's why the county is doing that, because the county, on some of their properties that they've been subsidizing, those things have run out now. And now they're having a crisis about now getting those people. So, again, this council brought up about land banking. Hope that we get some things come back during our regular council session so we can do that in East Tampa if we're buying things as well with these dollars. So I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so continuing.
Councilman Carlson,
Oh,
you
sorry.
got one last question?
Yeah,
One
should
more
we,
question.
I don't know how much longer this is, and we're getting up to close to 6 o'clock. Instead of rushing this, should we delay the rest of this conversation till the next CRA meeting, or do you all want to proceed?
Most
I'd
of them
rather
go
proceed.
easier. What time is it? If we go till 4 o'clock and see how far we go at 4, and we do have 3 things you have to approve. So if we do this for 10 more minutes and then get the approvals and then be done at 4, would that work for you? Okay. I just mostly want you to understand what it is I've given you, and then we can, again, either if you want workshops on this, sit with you individually if you have very specified questions or you want to get into some of the issues deeper. On the bottom half, these are the projects that could still be done downtown. They have not been formally been voted or brought before the CAC. They are in the strategic action plan, or they make sense because development will come to these areas. So they are projects that are not currently under design, and we are not currently soliciting any bids to design them, but they could potentially still be projects within the downtown area. The
We're going to,
infrastructure.
hang on, we're going to take a recess. We do not have a quorum.
Okay.
Sometimes slipped out.
Carlson, and
Citro.
sorry.
Please proceed.
So as you can see, just before the peach, you would have $38 million at the end of 2024 with all of those projects and moving forward. But again, remembering that the SPP agreement will go all the way out until 2027. And again, the peach are potential projects you could fund if the CRA board and the CAC preferred to move forward with those. So I wanted you to have everything out there as a list. So we've put out everything out there right now that could be conceived of. Tampa Heights, this is pretty straightforward. Rob already during his monthly report answered Councilman Dienfelter question about the actual agreement. Right off the bat, 74% of all revenues that come into the Tampa Heights TIF get put in a reserve fund to start paying the initial 18 million bond, and then we do know there will be an additional 5 million bond coming after that. So you have that information, and you can see by what our revenues right now are, we do expect to see another spike as we see the Heights Union, a lot of these other buildings come up, and the occupancy. So as we saw with some of the other areas, you suddenly see that TIF jump. So we will be, I don't think they'll have to wait at, 200,000 a year to get 18 million. But again, when all of that hits and when that property tax starts producing, we should start seeing a little bit more of a jump in the next few years. East Tampa, I wanted to give you some context to East Tampa. This is called a PCI map, a pavement condition map. And this was this was made after we did all of our 2008 road projects. All those red roads are failing roads. The bright green ones that you see off to the right in the center and the lower left, those were all repaving projects we'd already done with the CRA funds prior to July of 2008. So that's what East Tampa looked like, and the green is because of CRA dollars. In 2018, this is what we look like. And again, that is almost all directly. There was some CDBG funds in there. This is what the CRA has been able to accomplish for all of our residents in East Tampa as far as bringing our basic infrastructure up to what we would consider just livable standards. Repaving roads, repaving the potholes, making sure that everything wasn't just disintegrated shoulder where the pavement is running into the yard and the landscaping. We had a lot of gravel roads back then. So we have some roads that we don't control as a city, but I just wanted to give you some context of, and this is just one aspect of what the CRA has been doing in the past 10 years for the East Tampa community. And yes, I'm a little biased. So the East Tampa budget.
I think.
Hang on.
Yeah, okay.
Recognizes Councilman Carlson.
I think that's a great story that we should tell more. Thank you.
We've got lots like them, and we are working on that. So in 2019, we had a $2.9 million budget. At the end, because again, we haven't been doing the construction projects or any of the bigger projects, we had a $4.4 million balance, and you saw just 2 years ago it was $1 million. So this $4 million is not something we've been sitting on for years. It is just a recent phenomenon that we are finally starting to see our TIP grow. Again, we've listed out all the different projects, the affordable housing programs. You have just approved $900,000 and carrying that throughout the years. We've added the tree trimming grant, the public art grant, our facade grant, the reprogramming that you've been doing over the past few months. That's all reflected in here. And it hasn't been programmed yet, but we are doing, as part of the 34th Street, we are working, their art committee is coming in April to talk about the artwork for the roundabouts. Again, what the CRAs pay is for the enhancements above and beyond the basic infrastructure that the city provides. And so you see those two costs in peach. East Tampa is currently, as we discussed, going to a contract for a new SAP update. So again, projects will come out of that. So this time next year, we will know what kind of projects and what the priorities are for the community and additional housing funding and business incentives and so forth.
Councilman Carlson.
So can you put that chart back up just for a second?
Sure.
Please? So the Parks and Rec Department, when we were at the Fair Oaks Community Center event, they said that renovating as is would be about $3 million, but the community wants other amenities, which I imagine could cost as much as $5 or $6 million, maybe more. But you're saying that we're going to have essentially a $5 million surplus that we could apply. We need affordable
Some of
housing
it.
also. What is the CRA allowed to fund? Like in Al Barnes Park, which my colleague led, we partnered with the city on it. Is how much of a new building are we allowed to pay from the CRA money?
Do you want to give? So let me start with more of a philosophical answer. The CRA dollars are not meant to build full public facilities. This chapter 163 has not set aside an acceptable percentage. It gets brought up, the East Tampa CRA helped pay for D3 as part of community policing. That building was a little over $7 million. The CRA put in 1.2. In exchange for that 1.2, we got offices, we got community meeting rooms, and so forth. As we discussed last fall, park facilities are in the CRP, the Community Redevelopment Plan for East Tampa. I think you have to find your own community balance. Any funds that you would choose to contribute to this project, we would take to the Community Advisory Committee first. I'd say, I don't want to speak for the CAC without having had that request before them, but I do believe that there will be a mix of funds and a potential mix of funds.
So one last question related. So the community said they would like a new building, but okay, so let's say the city paid, we're all the same organization, but let's say the city paid for the building as is. They also said they want a swimming pool, an indoor basketball court. They want an IT center, so that would need computers. Are those the kinds of amenities that the CRA can pay for? Can the CRA pay for computers that would go in a computer room or not?
We would be better off paying for construction over the fixtures and furnishes and the technicalities that go to the inside.
What about the swimming pool and basketball courts and things like that?
For staying off the radar of Tallahassee, we are better off paying for true infrastructure.
Council, you want to chime in?
No, I would concur what you just heard from your director. There are limitations in the statute now. The other thing that we have to be very cognizant of is that any money that we do allocate needs to be consistent with the CRA plan. So we have to look at the plans as they stand or as they've been amended, and that's another aspect that we have to be very careful to follow as well.
Thank you.
As CRA director, I would not be offering $4 million towards Fair Oaks to build a new building, but I do believe there's room for conversation.
Yes, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, I promised you that, do you have a question about
You
East
know,
Tampa?
Just really quickly, if
Sure.
I may. I mean, my intent with the East Tampa investments that we made during last year's budget, we dedicated $1 million from city funds for Al Barnes, $1 million from CRA for Al Barnes, $200,000 now from the administration and the city for Fair Oaks renovation, is to see to it so that we can see all of the goals and aims that we've had brought to us by the community met in a manner that is fiscally responsible, but also in a manner that is inclusive of the community and the basic needs of the community. I know my councilman, my colleague, Councilman Goods, has talked about a senior center. I'd love to see something in that area for that. I think that's something that's very important. Obviously, Fair Oaks, anybody who goes there knows that it's obviously in need of real significant investments. I think there's a way that we can have both of these done, but in a way that is fiscally responsible for us. And I think both can be accomplished, but I think that we can work with the administration and our city council hat to make that done. And I know that my friend and colleague, Councilman Goods, is very passionate about that, and as we all are, but I know that that can happen, but in a realistic way, I'd say.
Councilman Goods.
Thank you, Ms. Vera. Thank you for your comments. I've had several conversations with the administration about doing both projects. I think you've been there, Ms. Van Loan, and you've heard my concern about both projects, and I publicly tell everybody, Fair Oaks came on the radar for me afterwards. Didn't come on before, came on afterwards. So my duty when I first got here was Al Bars. And that's what I had to strive for first. And then the Farrells came on. There are issues. And like I told the administration, we've got the master plan coming, we've got this coming, these ideas, but I made it clear to the administration that I want to do all we can to rebuild, renovate the best we can to help Farrells the best. But the public has told me that we have got to have a senior center because they're in a place that is an event center. They're not in a place to where they can have shuffleboard on the floor and do certain things like that. I don't have a gymnastic building like New Tampa has one. They've got an expansion going on. I don't have autism. Some of the parks, and that's another thing I talked about at our meeting. So Fair Oaks is used to be one of the busiest parts. Want to get it back to being one of the busiest parts. And the things we have to do to get it back there. But I think for the most part, we have an area that's big enough to get some of these things that Fair Oaks just won't be able to accommodate because it's too small to accommodate. But my love is for Fair Oaks. I'm behind the community 100%. And I made that clear to the administration that we need to get that done. But by the same token, we will not forget about Al Parks and those seniors because Mr. Johnson knows, you know, anybody knows, that is what the actual taxpayers of that community said they had wanted during campaign time, and they stressed that to every member on this council. So I have a commitment to them. I also have a commitment to the Fair Oaks community because I put several programs at Fair Oaks. I think Mr. Johnson can attest to that. I brought a national championship program to Fair Oaks. So my love is for Fair Oaks. And I want to see both projects done, but in a reasonable, economical, financial way. And that's why you always hear me talk about the dollars that they tell me to do these things and looking at other avenues to do them and meeting with other philanthropists that I've been meeting with to try to get that goal. So that's what's there.
Thank you. Count,
Just one
Shirley, because my next statement is going to be Councilman and Ms. Van Loan. Do you think we can clear off our agenda today by 4:30?
Oh, well before.
Thank you, Councilman Vieira.
Just really quick, my intention with that is, I'll tell you, like, for example, you mentioned the so-called autism park. It would be the second special needs facility here in the city of Tampa. I work with the administration to cut down the cost of that, again, wearing my city councilman hat, by 75%, by 75%, which is great. It's actually likely going to be six figures, I think it is. So that's, in other words, that's what I'm saying, which is I think we can accomplish both goals with some modernization, with some compromise to assist Fair Oaks as well as helping out our seniors. In other words, my bottom line is this: we're seeing steps forward on this issue. We're going to continue to see them, and we got to continue to push them forward, but in a fiscally responsible way that makes everything as efficient as possible.
The administration and the CRA have heard the board and the community loud and clear. Everyone involved is committed to coming up with a plan that will meet the needs and make everyone not just satisfied but happy with the outcome. The desire right now is, and the reason the request for the delay is, Sia mentioned this morning, is the city wants to come back with their ducks in a row to be able to say, here's exactly what our commitment can be. And so I don't think you'll just see steps forward. When that presentation is made, it will be leaps and bounds, and you will have, not from a programming standpoint, because again, that will require the community input and going back and having those workshops and the interaction and the community engagement, but from here's what we can do and here's what we are committing to the community to do. I think that will be much more than one step forward and a very good outcome for all involved. The last couple you can read on your own. I think you've gotten the trend of how the spreadsheets we put together you work. Again, the peach are not things that have been committed to yet. None of the remaining CRAs have dollars that are long-term commitments. Those are mostly with downtown and Tampa Heights. And again, we are available, whether it's the CRA managers or myself, if you want to have a worksheet, a workshop individually, or we are going into the budget season. We will start talking to you over the summer about our budgets. So we may be most likely be continuing these philosophical discussions as we move forward into our budget season. with that, I conclude my budget presentation.
Okay, and the staff report for distribution?
Yes.
Yes, Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, just one last comment on what you were just saying about the budget and the priorities and everything. Not to open up a big, long discussion, but I still think we should go back to the CRA board creating the strategies and goals and parameters that we give the CACs. The CACs are supposed to listen to the community and give us feedback, but we also have to give them some direction. And they're directed by section, I think, 163. But also we can give them some guidance and direction. Like we know from the community and looking at the numbers that that affordable housing is a serious crisis that we have to deal with, and so we could give that as direction and parameters, and maybe there are other things. So look forward to coming back to that at some point.
Perfect. It is that time of the year. We are distributing the draft annual activity report. I will also send this to you all electronically. You have 2 weeks. You'll get a cover memo, and when I send it to you electronically. So March 25th by 4 p.m., I'm asking for any edits or feedback you may have on these reports. If you have any questions, again, feel free to call me. I can come talk with you. We can have discussions over the phone to go over it. Most of what's in this report is required by state law. There were some additions to reporting, so you'll see some new formatting. Some of the charts that we've included are a statewide standard chart created by the Florida League of Cities and the Florida Redevelopment Association. What we're hoping to do by having a standard chart that all CRAs use, they've created an input, basically Excel database, and we are all entering our information, submitting it back to them, and then they can aggregate all this data across all the CRAs. And this is the first time that anyone will have been able to do this, aside from at the state legislature when they just ask us for some basic information. But the state hasn't had the technical ability to take 200 and some annual reports and then put all that data into any uniform big picture form. So we're hoping this spreadsheet will do that and these charts will do that. So that's why some of the differences that you'll notice. Once we get back everyone's feedback, we will finalize the report and come back to you on April 9th for formal adoption.
Any questions?
And that is not the final cover. We're working on the cover. We've got some exciting new ideas that we're going to try out for the cover, and so we're using that edit period to reflect sort of the new age of the CRAs that we've entered into in 2020. Are you ready for item 8?
Yes. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are we ready for item number 7?
8? Oh, we took 8. 7.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
I'd already changed the page. So we have the resolution for the contribution agreement. This is for the HRI building across the street that's under construction. They have to do a certain portion of the roadway right here between City Hall and their building, but it's only a portion of the street. The city is asking them to go ahead and do the full block, and so this is the city's contribution so that they do the portion that's not required but we would like them to do.
Okay, we have a motion to move the resolution made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Goods. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Item 9 and 10 are for both the downtown and the Channel District. This is the 6-month gap funding for the downtowner by the 2 respective CACs, and as mentioned, they both voted unanimously for just the 6-month gap.
What is the pleasure of this board?
Item 9 and 10, we moved it up tomorrow. right?
What you moved this morning was the agreement
Was
only.
the agreement.
This is the budget change required.
This is the reprogramming of funding.
I'll second.
Motion made by Councilman Goods, seconded by Councilman Vieira. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
With that, we're done with our portion of the CRA
Hang on
meeting.
one second, we have to.
Oh, yes.
Motion carried with council saying no, voting no, Maniscalco being absent.
Yes. Mr. Johnson?
Just want to give you an update. Councilman Good's asked about the equipment movement around the 26th Avenue pond. As you can see from this photograph here, they were digging out the drain. The drain was they discovered the drain was blocked. So we've had to remove so far over 200 tons of dirt from that drain to be able to make it work effectively. So that's what's going on out at the pond today.
You out playing in the mud, huh?
Yeah, getting ready for the rainy season.
Yes. Are you finished, Ms. Van Loan?
We are finished for the afternoon.
Thank you. Okay, information reports. Let's start with Councilman Dingfelder.
Mr. Chairman, do we have to put on the record that item 11 was pulled?
Yes, we already did that at the beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a carryover from this morning, in regard to the Strauss presentation, I'd like to again make a very soft motion to request that staff, our CRA staff, work with the Strauss representatives to see how the city and the CRA might assist with their proposed project. And I guess I'm flexible on the date of return. The only thing Ms. Lisi, not Ms. Veazey, Ms. Lisi had asked perhaps for a quicker return, at least to discuss it within 30 days, just so in case it needs to get into the city, county, CRA budget cycles, we do it with plenty of time. So I don't know if you're comfortable with any kind of preliminary report in 30 days. Does that work for you, Michelle?
We could easily come back with a status of what our discussions are, yes.
Okay. Why don't we'll leave it at 30 days, without pressure on you. So that would be my motion.
Motion made by Councilman Dingfelder, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Board.
Unless, of course, you want to read it off. Oh, okay. Councilman Goods.
Mr. Chairman, a while back we continued to talk about community business agreements, and we had a presentation made to City Council that was transferred over to our CRA status today. So I'd like to make a motion that the legal counsel and the CRA director draft a formal CRA policy describing, one, when it's appropriate to encourage or require private development projects seeking CRA funding, incentives, or resources to meet with affected registered neighborhood groups and neighboring property owners regarding a proposed private property development and negotiate possible community benefits that could be provided by the private provider. Two, the process and a notice for such meeting and the reporting of the outcome of such meeting or meetings to the CRA board.
Anybody going to second that?
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Good, seconded by Councilman Dingfelder. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Is that it, Councilman Goods?
That's it, sir. Thank you.
Councilman Vieira.
Nothing again. I wanted to apologize again. I did it very briefly to my council members for being in and out. I had to deal with issues with the virus and different issues like that with the administration, including for missing the. I contacted our friend and colleague Councilman Maniscalco on the funeral. But I'll be again making a motion this evening on this evening's agenda. So just be prepared for that. To potentially move it to April 23rd evening session. We'll only have one alcoholic beverage item. So just looking forward to everyone's thoughts on that, but I'll be moving for that. Thank you.
Councilman Miranda. Councilman Carlson.
Just one quick one. You all remember that FDOT asked us to move their presentations from CRA to the City Council, and we already approved putting them on City Council and expanding the discussion. Instead of just being about TVX, it's about the whole city, so it covers all of our districts too. So I'd like to make a motion to end the standing quarterly appearance FDOT makes before the CRA.
And they are coming to council then?
Yeah, it's already been scheduled. So we already made the motion to have them appear before council instead of the CRA because CRA limits it only to the CRA areas, and it was prior limited only to TBX. They can still talk about TBX in the CRA areas, but for example, New Tampa, South Tampa aren't covered in the discussion at all. So all we're doing is canceling this one, but we've already replaced it with the city council ones.
And if I may.
Yes,
Yeah,
please,
I second this and support this because it actually expands the context and the scope that we can discuss with FDOT on projects, as Councilman Carlson said, that go far beyond those items designated under TB next. So I support this.
And this is with their blessing. They suggested.
Yep.
You seconded, okay. Motion made by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Goods. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously.
And we're at 6 this evening, correct?
Yes.
I should know.
That's all right. Motion to receive and file made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilor Goods. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned until 6.